Good evening. I'm Mary Lou McFate. I am a member of the Experimental Aircraft Association, EAA Chapter 180 at Sarasota Airport, who is sponsoring this event tonight. And I am so honored to be here. I am so honored to be with these gentlemen. And we've been looking forward to this night. And I think you're very lucky to be here to share this evening with them as well. And we also have this event is being recorded, videographed also by Charles Clapsaddle and his team from METV Public Television in Manatee County. So it will be available for people as well to see who were not able to be here this evening. Before we start, may I ask you all to stand for the pledge to the flag of the United States. And if you'd like to, please just stand as you are able. You may sit. The flag is behind you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Thank you very much. I wanted to say something first about EAA, this wonderful organization that is 60 years old. And it is an organization of aviators and innovators. So that in its history of the 60 years, it has been here, and we have Andy Anderson with us tonight. Andy, you want to raise your hand? He was one of the founders of EAA 60 years ago. So he'll get to that. But we are involved in education, in programs, safety programs, and so many things. We have a clipboard in the back if you'd like to join us, if you'd like to be on an email list for some of our events that are upcoming. We have youth programs. I started flying in high school. I have been a member of EAA since 1967, even though the dues have gone up every year. But I remember how EAA people helped me. I was washing airplanes, and for that, I was able to fly right seat and log time. Just so many aviators, members of EAA had helped me along. And we have the Young Eagles program. Chip, would you like to stand up, please? Chip Miller from EAA is the chair of the Young Eagles program. So if you have children, grandchildren, ages, thank you, Chip, for doing that, ages 8 through 17. And the third Saturday of every month at Dolphin Aviation on the FBO on 41. The children have an educational program they go through with orientation. They have a flight that is free. We have wonderful volunteers that help with this youth, and we talk about other careers in aviation, meteorology, management, so many aviation, M&E, AMP, mechanics, etc. So think about that. That's one of the programs that EAA sponsors, and it's really fabulous. So I wanted to introduce all these gentlemen. I want to say too about I think about World War II. And the heroes that we all have. I told you about my starting out in aviation, and I wanted to tell you, I'm going to get all cherry. I wanted to show you one of my heroes when I was young. Does anybody recognize this photo of the Life magazine, June 1944? Do you recognize? I'll give you a hint. He was the first Marine aviator to win a Medal of Honor. No? Joe Foss. Joe Foss. And Joe went on, he was very upset that he won the Medal of Honor because they wouldn't let him fly anymore. He was a public relations asset at that point. So he was very involved in putting together the Air National Guard, and he served 2 terms as governor of South Dakota. And when he passed away on January 1st of 2003, had his committal service at Arlington Cemetery, Tom Brokaw, who featured him very much in his book, The Greatest Generation, said that it was all Joe Foss that was that guided him as a young high school student in South Dakota. And he felt that he was the impetus for even writing that book, The Greatest Generation, which is such a popular book. So this is Joe Foss, and Joe Foss and I were friends, and we would have breakfast every year, once a year. We would have breakfast together, just alone. And so I think, you know, we have so many heroes among us today. We have heroes out here as well. Brad, may I have Brad Smith stand up? Brad? Brad is the recent past president of Chapter 180 of Experimental Aircraft Association. And he came from Eastern Ohio, and I came from Western Pennsylvania, so we were very close together, I think. And he was a Navy A4 pilot, and he was shot down and in the Vietnam War, and he served almost 7 years as a prisoner of war. And I know that we have many, many other stories out there of all of you heroes who are out there right now. And so we're going to feature these heroes this evening, and then we are going to have plenty of time later for a food reception, and we hope that you will stay for that so that you can talk to these gentlemen, you can talk to each other, and share some of your stories together. So I appreciate that very much. Okay, so what we're going to do right now is we're going to go down through the table first, and I'd like to ask each of the gentlemen to tell us about themselves, just something very briefly, and you know, where you were from, at what age you were in the military, where you served, and maybe just, you know, about very quick, a few sentences. We'll take the mic. Bob, go ahead. Ellie will help you get the mic close to you.
My name is Bob Johnston, and I hate to tell you this, but I got a tooth that's about ready to come out. So if I have to stop and put it back.
Then you put it under your pillow.
Well, I went into the service just immediately after I turned 18, and I was in school, just started out in college. Got one semester behind me, and then we enlisted. I contribute a lot of, almost everything that's ever happened to me has been luck, one way or another. And for instance, the Army Air Corps at that time was trying to help. We didn't know what was going on, but they were trying to help out the railways. They were trying to help out the colleges that they were putting out of business by taking all the young men out. So I think I was among the very first group to go to a college training facility, a little place called Western Kentucky. They also play basketball there. You don't know Western? Well, anyhow, when we got there, that was a lucky thing. I was 3 months further schooling in stuff that was really elementary, but it kept Western Kentucky alive. Went from there down to, I had a tough time. My basic training was in Miami Beach.
And you know what? We're going to get to basic training a little further as we go down. So let's all talk about our training when we go through that phase. Why don't you just tell us very briefly where you served and what years?
Mostly served in the United States.
And what years? When did
45, 44, 43.
Okay.
43, 44, 45.
Okay.
I was in and out before I was 21 by about a month.
Okay, that's great. We'll hear now from. Okay. There, you can get it. If you get it about 4 inches from your mouth, that'd be good.
My name is Charles Jaleski. My voice is rather low, so if you want me to holler louder, I will do it. I was born in Poland, very luckily quarter of a mile on Polish side of the Russian border. And I went to the service, joining the Polish Air Force Academy in 1938. Now we knew that the war is coming, and we were told to really put to it, both lectures and flying. And we did it, and we almost finished course, but unfortunately, the war itself stopped. We started to run after we lost all our aircraft and transport. We made our way to Hungary and then to Greece and to France, where unfortunately we stayed too short a time because they told us we were very glad to get out because we wanted to fight, but they didn't. So it was very lucky for us that Arandora Star British liner came to Saint-Jean-de-Lys in southern France and picked us all up. On the way over, the Germans were broadcasting. They knew that we were on that ship, will sink it. And I was very lucky. I mean, I was very happy about it because I hated to travel on a ship. We got to England in 1940. And the training started in the middle of the year, about July.
And Charles, hold that thought on the training as he did. We're going to
Yes,
get
okay,
back to
fine,
that.
no, right,
Just hold that
No.
thought, and we're going to get back to that all together.
sure.
All righty. Sir?
Well, reading from the script here, I was raised in Philadelphia, and the day after Pearl Harbor, I enlisted in the Air Force. Of course, they couldn't take us. It was so backed up until February. I went away February the 19th, 1942, into the Aviation Cadet Program. And I went through that in the Southeastern Command, which was Alabama, South Georgia. From there, we went to, I actually went to Nebraska flying B-26s, or getting acquainted with B-26s. And that was quite a thing. One little anecdote of my training in B-26s was going from Nebraska to South Dakota. And in our trip to South Dakota, it was very boring, to say the least. So I had the opportunity to say, hey, boys, let's go under that railroad bridge rather than over it, which I did. The only problem was base commander was out with his family driving in the same area as what we were flying. And the MPs were waiting for me when we got to our base. And one thing he told me, he says, you know, you son of a bitch, if you were not going overseas pretty soon, you'd be in the brig. And I said, well, I'm sorry, sir.
Well,
He
that's
says, I'm going to let you go.
That's a training story. That is great. That's a good one. We learned some lessons from that one. Okay, sir. Where you're from and your when you got in the service and where you served and how long?
I'm Bill Orban, and I grew up in Ohio. Started out in Cleveland, went to Ohio State, and enlisted in the Air Corps in the summer of '42, but they were pretty well piled up, so they kind of shoved us back a little bit and sent us back to Ohio State again. We didn't get called up then until February of '43. And from then on, we started our training. And so that was a, they just acted like they didn't have room for us. The first thing they did, they sent us down to Miami Beach for basic training right in the middle of the winter. And I started to like the Air Corps. And then for primary, they sent us back to Lakeland in November, and I really loved the Air Corps.
That's a great training story.
Yeah.
Andy?
So,
I'm sorry.
about
Testing 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Okay. My name is Wendell Anderson, or Andy, let's call me that. I joined the service in 1943 and lasted through 46 as the U.S. Navy CB. And I joined the military for one purpose. I wanted to fly a Corsair. And they said, "You're so damn colorblind, boy, you don't know the difference between red and green. So how are you going to be with us? So you're going into the Seabees," and that I did. But I want to divert from that for a moment, and I want to tell you all about the EAA, as how it was formed. So give me a few moments, would you, Mary?
Sure.
And here we go on that. My production agency that I had after the war, it was TV and print. And I brought out about invitations to set with Paul Poberezny and Chet Wellman. And they asked me to come up and join them at Hale's Corner up there in Milwaukee. We flew a Piper Cub up there, and we had our meeting underneath the wings in the afternoon in the heat, in a pasture. And but the boys were sitting there, and all of them talking about building home-built aircraft. And I said to them, well, what is it that you guys do? Well, we build home-built aircrafts. And what's the name of this group? And they said, it's the Fly-In. I said, the ointment or the vinegar or the molasses? What does Fly-In mean? And they said, well, that's what we are. And I said, let's change that name right now. And so the thing is that I introduced to Paul, and I said, I think it ought to be called, by what I see and hear, is the International Experimental Aviation Association. And by golly, that became the coin word, and that's what you've had all through these years, is EAA. And so we flew back to Rockford, Illinois at that time, and that was going to be the first convention for EAA. I had a buddy in Chicago, which I was producing television at the time, and his name was David Garraway. And Dave, I said, we have a crazy thing going, but a bunch of guys are going to meet at Rockford, Illinois, with their small home-built aircraft. And in so doing, they're going to be able to, get together and see what goes on with building that small craft. And it was Dave Garraway that used his television show, the Today Show, in the mornings, every morning, and I think some of you are old enough to remember, and he'd said at the time, in his throwaways that I provided for him, and that was, go to Rockford, Illinois, see the EAA meeting and convention. 100,000 people appeared at that first meeting. And so Poberezny and the boys were quite startled. How in the hell are we going to handle all this stuff? And so the second meeting was, of course, involved I'm going fast as I can, Mary. The second meeting was at the same airport in Rockford, Illinois. And they said, we can't pay you anything. And I said, that's okay. I'll take the concessions. I'll work theirs for you. And the second year, we sat back for a board meeting to find out how did that second meeting go. And they said, you're the only bastard that made any money. So I was in at that time. I said, I taught you how to run this convention. It's your own now, from now on. And that's when Oshkosh came along, and the boys from Oshkosh said, we'll give you a mess hall, we'll give you an exhibition hall, we'll give you hotel rooms and all. The city of Rockford, Illinois did not give them anything. And so it was a welcoming thing for the EAA at that time to go to Oshkosh. So you've had EAA in Oshkosh now for a number of, I think it's a total of about 64 years.
Since 1968.
Yes, very good. I can't remember that. But anyway, I'm 90 years old, and I fought with the Seabees and with the old man MacArthur in Leyte in the Philippines. My trip was we came to Guadalcanal, and then we moved down to New Guinea up to Hollandia, and then we did a convoy into the Philippines. And of course, that was my end of my trip, and which I enjoyed every moment of it. It gave this kid great knowledge and earnings of society, and I was able to say that it probably is the best 4-year education that a guy could ever have. No professor could have ever taught me anything more valuable than what that was. Now, what else do I have to say for you is that the organization is known today, and without the notoriety given EAA by the television artist Dave Garroway and the Today Show, over 100,000 people then came to that first show, but now today it is the world's largest, considered the world's largest convention. 1 million people go to EAA at Oshkosh over the 10 days that they run the show. I can't believe how big that has become. And Paul was quite an initiative fellow when he put that thing together, and he worked hard. Well, anyway, that's my story for now, and I'll sign off. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. And I wanted to say, too, that the Air Venture, the Oshkosh that he's talking about, it is the largest outdoor sporting event in the world. And I think one of the fascinating things is when I'm there is never a piece of litter on the ground. It's a huge place. And other places we go, a very small area, there's a lot of litter on the ground. There's not one piece of litter out there. It's a very interesting, wonderful, diverse group of people from all over. Thanks, Andy. Sir?
My name is Jack Grayson, and I grew up in Niagara Falls, New York. After high school, I took a bus to Fort Niagara and enlisted in the Army Air Force Cadet Training Program. That was in September, but I didn't get called up until February. February, I got called up and went to basic training in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Everybody got colds and pneumonia there. And from there, we went to Nashville, Tennessee for classification. And they determined whether or not we had the right aptitudes for navigation, bombardiering, or flight training. I was selected for flight training because the navigation and flight schools were very crowded at that time. From then on, I was in the West Coast Training Command. Pre-flight was at Santa Ana, California. Gunnery school was at Kingman, Arizona. And bombardier training was at Dusty Deming, New Mexico. And from Deming, we were sent to a replacement center where we were formed into crews, and we trained in Ardmore, Oklahoma on war-weary B-17s. And from there, we tried to get home, but D-Day was coming up pretty soon. And we were sent to Nebraska, where we received an airplane, a B-17. We broke it in, we swung the compasses, and flew from there to Grenier, New Hampshire, and to Gander, Newfoundland, and then over to Northern Ireland. And we waited for the weather to clear and flew nonstop to Northern Ireland. And from there, we went to a replacement depot where we were assigned into crews. And I flew 35 missions without a scratch in the 8th Air Force in World War II. I was in the 487th Bomb Group at Lavenham in the 836 Squadron. And after I came back, I was sent to Texas, and shortly thereafter was discharged after the atomic bomb was dropped.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I think we're ready for the 8th Air Force now.
My name is Dick Barabalt. I'm from New Haven, Connecticut, and I went to Yale. While I was at Yale, the war started. Well, just after before I got to Yale, the war started, and I went to Yale in 1942. And in October of '42, I enlisted in the Army Air Force. And when I was put in the active duty in February 1943, I think, with 2 or 3 other people here that I didn't remember meeting them there for some reason. I trained. I went to pilot training, and a single engine. And during the war, I flew P-51s out of Wormingford, England, and I went overseas commissioned a pilot in May of 1944. Went overseas in December of '44 and was there at the end of the war. I enjoyed. That's a dumb statement. The one thing I didn't like about combat, among many other things, was I found out that the other people were shooting back at you. Every time you went and did strafing or anything like that, they all shot back, which was not very fair, in my opinion, because when I was in training, they never shot back at me. But that's my service so far.
Thank you. That was a good training point also. More 8th Air Force.
My name is Stan Chichester. I was born in Freeport, Long Island, New York. I grew up and had a neighbor who was in the National Guard. He said you should join with great camaraderie. So I joined, and the year before the war started, we were inducted into service. We ended up in Georgia. And when the war started, we were sent out to the West Coast. We were a National Guard outfit. While out there, I signed up with the Air Force and was accepted and went through training and finished training in May of '43. We went to Pio, Texas, to fly B-25s, only there weren't any there. And we ended up being assigned, or I ended up being assigned as co-pilot with a crew that was headed overseas. So we spent the summer in training. And then we went to Scott Field and got a brand new B-17. We went to Bangor, Maine, and stayed overnight. And then we went to Newfoundland and Iceland and on to Prestwick. And from Prestwick we were assigned to the 94th Bomb Group at the Ruffin Air Force Base at Bury St. Edmunds. It was there that we went on 3 bombing missions to start with the Emden, Bremen, and München. And on October 14th, we went on a raid to Schweinfurt, Germany, to the ball bearing plant. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. We got shot down. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was great. We've got a lot to look forward to. I wanted them to do that base for you, and now we're going to move into some specifics. But first, I'd like to have everyone in this audience who's a veteran or currently serving to stand up. Could you please all stand up? The veterans. Yay. Have a seat. Now, if I might have anybody who is a sibling or son or daughter of a veteran, please stand. Yay. You serve too. You support these people and you serve too. Thank you. You serve even when you're out of uniform. Okay. Now, somebody else I wanted to recognize that I forgot is Dale Alliard. Could you stand up, please? Dale, can you tell them your title with the Historic Aviation Organization in Sarasota if they'd like to talk to you during the reception tonight?
Dale Howard, Vice President of the Historic Aircraft Society, sort of a sister organization of the EAA.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, now we're gonna go through and I'm gonna ask you something, and I want you to think. I'd like you to tell us your most vivid recollection of your service. It could be one incident, and I'd like you to think of just one incident that really sticks out in your mind, and maybe 2 or 3 sentences. One incident. We'll start here again.
Kind of unique, really. I wound up as an instructor pilot and a loose tooth. And one night we were flying out of Marchfield, California, and I just happened to be in the co-pilot seat, and I was looking out to my right, and I saw this huge explosion off in the distance, so far away that there was an outline of mountains between me and them. I thought it was a plane crash. So I came down and I reported it. Nobody knew anything about that. Never heard. They had us head up as a search group. We went out. We got a long way. It had to be farther than that. Found out later on it was one of those first atom bomb tests. We just happened to catch it.
That's quite a recollection. Sir? A couple sentences, just one incident that really sticks into your mind still today.
Okay. One night we were bombing Essen, Germany, with a heavy anti-aircraft fire. And after getting off the target, in about 15-20 minutes, the second pilot tapped me on the shoulder. I looked at him and he pointed to the gas gauges, and they were going down and down and down. So the only thing to do was to call Mayday, which I did, and they responded very well. In no time, they sent us a signal that they are ready. Okay. And then so about half an hour later, the co-pilot taps me on the shoulder. And I said, now what? He pointed at the gauges. We're back to the normal position. So obviously it was the gas what is it? Okay. That was, you can imagine how relieved I was.
But it woke you up, and that's another good training point.
Yeah.
Sir?
Sure.
Well, the most memorable thing that will live with me for the rest of my life is we were clearing hedgerows over St. Lo, D5, and we got hit. My right engine went out, and we come down in the middle of an area where the Germans were equally far away as what the 25th Division was, or part of it. And 3 of my people were killed, and 3 of us survived. And people ask me why I wear this hat. I wear this hat in memory of those 3 that never made it. And I will live with that for the rest of my life.
Thank you.
I think one of the most memorable things in my life was when we got picked up at night with the floodlights and tried to get out of them. And they immediately pick you up with radar and their anti-aircraft guns. And at night, you see the flash, you don't see the black. And our airplane got rocked pretty well, and we did get back. And the next day, I went down to check out the holes in the airplane, see how it was. And the crew chief says, "Hey, Lieutenant, I got something for you." And I said, "Oh, yeah?" And he hands me some junk, and he puts it in my hand. And I said, "What is all that?" And he says, "That's the flak that was embedded in your seat." I still have it. So it was quite a memorable thing.
Yes. Andy.
My story is really interesting from this standpoint that it had nothing to do with the aerial flying, but the war was going to be over in about 10 days or maybe 8 days. And about 4 of us fellows were standing outside the mess hall at 4 o'clock, or about 2 to 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And all of a sudden, we were discussing, of course, how many points we had to get to retire ourselves from this island and get on a ship and go back to the States. And so as we were standing there and chatting with a cup of coffee, all of a sudden, as the first gentleman said, that he saw this white flash over the mountain. Well, we saw this white flash out in the northeast quadrant of our viewing point there on the Philippine island of Samar. And what in the hell is that? And some guy said, "Oh, just some poor bastard got hit." And how many points do you say you have to go back to the States tomorrow, or the next day when the war is over? So we entirely forgot the issue of that situation. I wrote a book called The Life of a Seabee, and in it has one section story on the Indianapolis being hit that night. The moon was bright, and this commander of this, or the captain of that ship, was he brought the atomic bomb to Tinian, and he dropped it off, and then it was Tinian. And so he came back, and he said to the crew, he says, "It's been a hot, fast run and so on. Go ahead and enjoy yourself sleeping on the deck tonight." Somebody had to light a cigarette because a submarine was sitting there having air on behalf of the evening. And with that beautiful moon out in Hirohito, he said, "Hey, look, big, beautiful ship." And so down he dove, and he took that ship out in about 28 minutes. And we lost 600 men on that ship, and I think it was 1,100 survived, or 1,100 were killed, were dead. 600 survived. And on my base at the 7th Fleet, sitting there in Samar, Philippines, I went down in the morning, and about 4 days later, and I said, "Where did you get all these guys, the bodies, as well as some injured?" And they said, "Well, there was a ship got hit about 4 or 5 nights ago. It was the Indianapolis." And a very sorrowful thing, because we should have reported something there at that hour, because our 5th Air Force was right there ready to go. They're flying all the time, and they should have been able to go chase this down and see what's going on. But I'm sorry for that event, because I've held that a little bit in guilt. But that's my story, and so there's many of them, so many stories that I'd bore you to death. But that's my story of the Indianapolis, and there's a gentleman here living, and he still survives in Sarasota, so I have been able to talk to him. You're next.
Sir, and how about an incident that you really remember, you'll not forget?
I'll never forget returning from bombing the synthetic oil plants in the Leipzig area. We turned after dropping our bombs, and plane got hit in both outboard engines. And we had to leave the formation, and we gradually lost altitude until we reached the English Channel. At the English Channel, we didn't know whether we were going to make it or not, and we headed up the Thames estuary. And all our radio equipment, identification, friend or foe, and everything was all wiped out. And we were coming up the Thames estuary, and the British were manning flak towers, and they were shooting at this poor old B-17 that was limping along. And finally, when they got a hold of it, got us in sight, they saw what it was, and they stopped firing. And we got just up at the end of the estuary, and we couldn't go much further. And we landed at a crash landing site. The name of it, I don't quite remember. But anyway, they had troughs of gasoline all on the outsides of along the border of the runway, and they lit the gasoline off, and that lifted the fog for a few minutes. And we came in, and the pilot made a 3-point landing, and he put the brakes on, and the plane just dropped down and rubbed on the ground. But we made it back.
All right.
Well, I guess the most vivid recollection I have is my first mission. I was still 20 years old, and I flew on the wing of our squadron commander, who incidentally later stayed in the Army, and he was a major general. Name was Ed Geller. We became very good friends. But anyway, I was flying his wing, and he briefed me before we went out, because it being my first mission, he wanted to be sure I knew what was going to happen. And he said, now one important thing, he flew about, when we go into combat, fly about 50 to 100 yards off my wing, and if you see me fire my guns, you fire your guns. So no matter what it is, you just fire. I said, okay, all right. So we went up and we were told to shoot targets of opportunity. And we're flying along at about, I'd say maybe 100 feet. And all of a sudden I see him start going down a little, going faster and faster and going down. We got down to about 20 feet. And the next thing I know, he's shooting into what I thought was some woods. And he starts firing, so I did what I was supposed to do. I started firing too. The next thing I know, I've seen an explosion in my life, but never this big and never this close. Now remember, we're going about 350 miles an hour, so you're closing at about 7 miles a minute. So we came up to that, and of course, when the thing exploded, there was debris all over the place. And of course, the first thing you do is you got to pull up, because if the debris hits your plane, you're done in a fighter, because you only have one engine, and it doesn't fly very good without any engines. And I can remember pulling up, and then at that point, the second recollection was he pulled off one way and I pulled off the other. We went different ways, and of course I couldn't find him. So my first mission, I was all alone over Germany, someplace where I wasn't sure where I was, but I obviously found my way back. But that is quite a recollection I had.
We were on the raid to Schweinfurt, Germany, the ball bearing plants. We dropped our bombs and headed for home. We flew for about an hour and 15 minutes. We were under constant attack. The tail gunner called out that the plane bombing the tail of the plane. The fighter came in, but all his guns are gone. It tore up the rudder, knocked out the oxygen, wounded the 4 members in the back of the plane, knocked out an engine, and put us into a steep climb. We could not keep up with the group. I turned to Roy Davidson, the first pilot, and I said, Roy, we've got to go down. There's no oxygen back there. He was the first pilot. He was the one to make decisions. And he was thinking the same thing, and so we dove on down. There was a cloud level, what we thought was the cloud level at about 10,000 feet. Thought we could get in that cloud formation and hide out. But it turned out to be very thin. and we went down to ground level. And we started flying west again. We flew for about an hour and 15 minutes on 3 engines, and we lost another engine. And I had to make a decision. Were we going to try to get back to England, which was about an hour and 15 minutes away, or should we land? And he decided to land. I spotted a small farm, and we headed for it, and we landed, wheels up. There were 3 or 4 cows on the field, and we ran into them. We reached the other side of the field and crashed into a forest that was there. The cockpit door was jammed shut, so we couldn't get out. I grabbed an axe that was on the back of the first pilot's seat and started chopping at a window. I turned around, and there was the bombardier and the navigator. They had broken the door down. So we got out of the plane. We got out to the waist gunner's windows. And the next thing I remember, I was standing about 75 or 100 feet behind the plane in the track that the plane made as it skidded across the field. Roy was given morphine to the ball turret operator who had been hit in the knee. Charlie Brewer, the bombardier, was standing there with me. I turned to Charlie and I said, "Charlie, let's get out of here." And so we headed into the forest. I'll tell you a little more later on.
Thank you, sir. Now I'd like you to tell us, maybe we'll start with somebody else. We'll start with you this first time, give him a little rest, and, well, we'll start here again, but I'll try to go the other way to give you a little chance, because you're always starting, and it's probably not something you enjoy doing. Is that all right for you all to start? I'd like you to tell us now very briefly about one incident about a comrade that you remember. It could be about one comrade, an incident, or all of your comrades. Maybe how you feel about all of your comrades, or one in particular. You can start. Yeah, go ahead. Put it down.
Well, the fellow who, one of the crews that I was training, we were out in the Pacific, and he was the first pilot. I was the IP, and somebody from somewhere, we don't know where it happened, lobbed a pretty good sized slug at us. Came through the pilot's side of the, this was a B-24. Came through the pilot's side, and talk about getting flak in the wrong place. He got a package of flak. The problem was that we still don't know who the heck shot that shot, where it came from or anything. But when we got back to base, he had to be put in the hospital. And they said, well, we don't want anybody digging around him who doesn't know what they're doing. We'll send him back to the States. Anybody here that would go back with him? And I said, I will. So I took him back to the States, and they dug his flak out. And he did fine. He did so fine that he was wound up marrying a girl that he met who was in the movies, one of the Goldwyn girls. Remember the girls that went around with This girl was crazy about that guy and chased him way up into Idaho. He couldn't get away. That's the only time that anybody in my plane got hit. I consider it good luck.
Oh, good. That's great. Okay.
We were like one family in a squadron. If there was any way we could help each other, we did. And it paid off, because the longer we stayed together, the more we realized that we should care about each other and each other family who are in Poland or in England. Those were the happy guys. So there's in any way we could do and make the life more pleasant. It was really worth doing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, the people that I most conveyed and the people I appreciate most were the P-47 pilots who flew over top of us when we were going over the North Sea to drop a few bombs, northern Germany and Norway and a couple other countries there. But without those P-47s, I knew that they had the same engine in their P-47 as what we had in our B-26, which was the R-2800. And it was a good engine, very powerful engine. And like I say, I appreciate those people who flew over top. We had to fly low because of radar, and it didn't seem to matter with the P-47 guys. They went hell-bent for election anyway. So that's who I most appreciated in my time over there in northern England. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to say, too, on that segue, I wanted to do a shout-out for a program that's going to be done at Florida Studio Theater a week from today. That's the 11th of February. Dr. Todd Moya from Texas, who wrote the book Freedom Flyers, which is about the Tuskegee Airmen whose P-51s accompanied the B-17s and really helped tremendously to cut down on the losses that the 17s experienced at the beginning of the war. And he is speaking at from 11:30 to 1 that day. It's a luncheon. And then from 5 to 6:30 that day, also at Florida Studio Theater, will be a panel discussion on the just opening play called Fly, which is also about Tuskegee Airmen. It's a production of Florida Studio Theater. So those are two things you might want to attend on that a week from today. Thank you. Sir?
I think one of the outstanding things, I had the best crew of any in the 8th Air Force. And a lot of people claim that, but how many of them had reunions till 5 years ago? And I have two that are still survivors, and we speak together at least once a month. And when the colonel used to go, he didn't fly much, he would come and ask if he could use my crew. And I'd say, well, why do you come and ask? And he says, because it's just courtesy. And he says, the other thing is, your crew makes me answer all their questions. And I don't remember all the questions that should be answered. So it was a feather in my cap as far as I thought, and I've always felt very, very good about the crew we had. They were a great bunch of guys, and we got along great, and so it was a very nice way to go through the whole system.
Thank you.
I want to say there's just one fellow that really was truly my martyr, and I'm a Republican. But it happens to be a fellow named Harry, and he dropped the atomic bomb, which saved my life and saved many of us. So I have one tribute to pay, and that is good old Harry. He did it, and he did it outside, of course, of being justice amongst the military. But the idea was he saved my life. Thank you, Harry.
In England, we lived together. That is the officers. We played baseball together. We played volleyball together, and shared books. We shared any food we had sent from home. And it was just a good-natured bunch of guys. And after the war, we all went back to the four corners of the United States. Most of my crew was from the West Coast, and I was from the East Coast. And when I went out to California, 2 years after I started college, I did my best to try and get a hold of them, but it was very difficult. I made contact with two of them, and they were married and had families. I was single, and it just wasn't the same anymore. We still probably think of each other, but I haven't made any contact with them in a long, long time.
Well, I will tell you one that maybe my wife won't let me continue, but a good friend of mine, we came in from a mission, and he had shot down an ME-109. And he came in, and when you did that, you did a roll on the over the runway. And he got halfway through the roll, and the plane crashed. Now, when you're going 300 miles an hour in a P-51, which is made mainly of aluminum, crashes, there's not much left, except a bunch of pieces. And we went running out, hopefully finding something. And should I tell him what I found, Freddie? Found a glove and a hand in it. That's all we ever found of him. I'll give you a better story. That's not a very good story to end with. One of my very good friends was a young man by the name of Griff Allen. Griff Allen was about 5'7", weighed about 110 pounds, soaking wet, and was Irish and had the biggest Irish mouth you've ever seen in your life. And we roomed for 2 years and had more fun than I've ever had in my life. We managed to get drunk almost every night we weren't flying. And when the war was over, I moved into Pittsburgh, and he was living in Ravenna, Ohio, which wasn't far from Pittsburgh. And in between there was Youngstown, Ohio. So after about a couple of months of being there, I called him, and we got together, and our wives, and he came with his wife, and we met in Youngstown and managed to drink a few drinks. And I tried to control him, as I normally did, but he was very uncontrollable. And so about a month later, we decided we'd meet again, and his wife said, "No, you can't go out. He's a bad influence on you." So I didn't see my friend Griff for a long time after that. I was a bad influence on him. God, I can't believe that.
I was co-pilot with a crew of 10. Of the 10, all have died except me. The first pilot was only 19 years old when we were there. And after the war, I started a round robin. I sent it off to the tail gunner, and I said, pass it on and add your views to it. And he did, and so I got letters from almost all the crew members. The second squad, the Fine Food Committee, would meet about once a year. It still does. There aren't many members left now. It's mostly family members. But they met in Bradenton, I think it was then. So I went there and I met with the first pilot and his wife. And he was telling a story about the fact that he had this car and he would drive his children, his two daughters, to school. And the car was rather decrepit. And so they were embarrassed and they said, don't go by the school, drop us off a block away from the school. And so he did. And then finally it came to the stage where he was going to sell the car, and he said, you know, I was going to give you this car, but of course the last thing in the world you want is this car. And they said, oh no, we'd love to have it. And so they ended up with the car that they drove to school with great pride. That's the only story I'll tell.
Thank you. I think we'll continue with you, sir, and we'll work back this way for a little change. We'll go to the right this time. Can you tell us in one sentence what you would like this generation to remember about your service and the service of your comrades?
I'm to be the first one. Well, I have two wonderful daughters, and I think they just appreciate the fact that I was in the Air Force and that I served and I had a good story to tell. And they appreciate the fact that I served my country, and they appreciate what I did. And that's about all I have to say.
That's a lot. Thank you very much, sir.
Well, I think that I'd like to have them remember that a lot of people died for them. And a lot of good friends of mine. What I want to remember about the service, as I said, I want them just to remember that all that we did for them called the greatest generation. Thank you.
Thank you.
What I remember is that everybody had a great respect for the organizations they were with. I never saw anybody in the Air Force say anything bad about the organization or anything. We never hesitated to go out to the flight line after the briefing, and we went to places like Berlin and Leipzig, and we knew we were going to lose a certain number of planes, and nobody hesitated to turn back or anything. Everybody had a lot of love for their country and for their friends that were in the service and their buddies along with them.
I don't know. I feel that every youth in this country today, with the cultural societies we have of the various thinkings and the attitudes, I maybe have to say that I wish, or say, would they kindly join the military for a 2-year run? And I think the military could be the best incentive to give the youth of this country a feeling of what it is all about. Thank you.
I'll have to agree with that because there there's too many people out there that don't have any motivation, and I feel that there should be some reason for these people to get together and not be creating problems when they should be helping our country and helping produce in businesses or anywhere else and put forth their efforts. And there are young people out there that are doing it, but there's just too damn many that are wandering around and haven't found their way. And with a war, everybody gets involved, and we all felt that we had to do our part. So that made a big difference.
Thank you. Very good.
Well, I could say amen to everything that's been said here by these people. That I can remember the day after Pearl Harbor, the enlistment centers were just overflowing. And it was just very difficult to go away immediately because they just didn't have a place for the people to go to. And I would like to see the young generation have a little more consideration as to what has happened in the past in this country. We have had our ups and downs, of course, but still the United States of America, and we should all stick together and go that way. Thank you.
The same thing as this gentleman. I subscribe to everything that was said. But let's make sure that we give the ensuing generations all the enthusiasm and all the willpower to do for the country. Not for the individuals, for the country. That's what my mother, when she saw me off on the station to the academy, I kind of apologized to her, but she said, if this is the way you want to serve your country, God bless you. Goodbye.
And sir, you have the honor of the first word and the last word.
A lot of words in between here, too. I agree with that whole bunch. There's something that's sitting out there just ready to hit us. And that's a huge realization that religion now is going to get in the way of a lot of things, particularly the ones that we just don't understand. And they could, freedom's not free. They've been building up a bill for us, and we're going to have to settle with it one way or the other. It will not be pleasant for our children and our grandchildren. I'm sorry to say that.
Just before Q&A, because I know that you have questions for them. Some of you will feel comfortable asking your question of them so that their answers and your question can be shared with the whole group. Others of you may wish to individually greet these heroes during the time of our reception, so you have that choice. So just before we take Q&A, I'd like to, as we're taking Q&A, I'd like to call up Paul Munson to come forward to this podium, and if Paul would come up, and I'll take some questions now. Okay, yes, well, Paul's going to come up here, but, oh yes, who has the microphone? Ellie is one of our CAR children. When you're talking about children and the youth today, Ellie is with the Children of the American Revolution, the Chichiacobi chapter. You know DAR, Daughters of the American Revolution, Sons of the American Revolution, and there's the Children of the American Revolution. And she is very patriotic, as are all the other children. They're coming out to see the Ford and the 17th Saturday morning, the local group. And so she is helping us this evening, and she'll be around with the microphone. Who has a question? We'll take one before. Over here in this. Oh, just wait a minute, sir. We need to catch the mic for the recording tonight. Ellie's coming. And if you could stand up, sir, is that comfortable?
Does anybody here remember Bill Brownell? He flew a P-51. He also was the one that was testing the 51s for the newspaper owner at that time in Sarasota. And something blew up in the back of the 51, and he would look like a piece of burnt paper when you saw him afterwards. And he died from that explosion on the ship, and the fellow that was in the back seat, he didn't get a chance to bail out. The parachute, because it was too close to the ground, the parachute got caught in the tail, and he got killed too. But I'm real curious if anybody knew him. Nobody here. He could fly a P-51 upside down.
Happens.
I think in the old days he flew those. No, I'm not going to say that because I might get into a fight. No, thank you.
We have another question. If you could, sir, if you stand up, please.
I want to talk to Stanley. Stanley, that's you. When you went to Schweinfurt, was that October 14th, 1943? I was on that mission too. I finally got back to England without a scratch on the plane. 18 of us had to bail out over England due to weather. I was one that bailed out.
Wow. Thank you. Come on up.
You have one first.
No, we're going to take questions, but while she's getting around, I'm going to have, so that Paul can sit down again and be more comfortable. Oh, I'm sorry. We've invited Paul Munson here to say something about his father. And I just want to have him the opportunity to do that while you're all gathering your questions. Paul, thank you for coming tonight.
Well, I wanted to have my father here, and he was not able to make it. He was born and raised in Iowa, and still lives in the same town where he was born. And I just paraphrased a few things that he wanted to share with all of you that served. And first, I had a question for, I think is his name Dick, that was the B-17 on B-17, third from the end, right next to you, Andy. So you flew 33 missions. So that must have been before they dropped the limit to 25?
They raised it from 25 to 30 to 35.
Okay.
And I had 34 missions.
Now that's amazing.
They said I could leave.
So I wish my father could be reading this, and I'll keep this very short. In the winter and spring of 1944, my dad was B-17 pilot, flew out of Amendola, Italy. He's assigned to the 414th Squadron in the 97th Bomb Group in the 15th Air Force, and he flew 23 missions. During the big week of February 44, the 8th and 15th Air Force coordinated missions hitting German aircraft industry for 6 consecutive days. They bombed many factories. As you all know, they encountered a lot of flak. The German fighters were improving with their rockets. During the big week, the total 15th Air Force bomber loss was 89 aircraft, or 18%. 1,890 airmen were killed or missing. So my dad's crew started to wonder when their number was going to come up. On March 18th, the 97th Bomb Group was scheduled to bomb the aerodrome in Udine, northern Italy. Because of German resistance, they expected it was going to be light, and they thought it was going to be a milk run. So that was a time when new crew members could be interspersed with the more experienced crews. So this being their 23rd mission, they brought on 3 new crew members, replacing the navigator, bombardier, and waist gunner. Well, it was nowhere near Milk Run, and they were attacked by enemy Focke-Wulfs. My dad's plane was in Coffin Corner, one spot in front of tail end Charlie, who was shot down almost immediately. Shortly after that, my dad's plane was attacked by 7 Focke-Wulfs. They had new long-range rockets that could fire from a range the 50 cals couldn't reach. So when they fired back, I'll never forget my dad telling the story that they'd watch the tracers, drop in front of the Focke-Wulfs. And so there wasn't anything they could do. So eventually one of the rockets hit the right wing, and they had to bail out immediately. And a quick story, he told the pilots didn't wear parachutes when they were flying, and so he made sure the crew got out, and he quickly grabbed his parachute, threw it on, and the plane was going down, and so they bailed out, and he grabbed the ripcord, and it wasn't there. He'd put the parachute on upside down. So he found it, so a lot of memories he had, but for 45 days they were in Yugoslavia, behind enemy lines, and I'll take a shout out to Tito's partisans that helped my father and many other airmen escape, and they hid in the mountains for 45 days and escaped without getting captured. So one of my dad's best friends for his entire life was the new waist gunner that day, and they had first met on the day they went on this milk run mission. And my dad said, it's going to be an easy run, we'll teach you the ropes. And Bob always said, I never knew that those ropes were going to be attached to a parachute. So growing up as his son, he never talked about this. And even my mom said she didn't really know anything about his experience. And my younger brother joined the Navy and was an F-18 pilot, and he started getting my dad to talk. My mom started taking notes, and she located every one of the crew members and tracked them all down and interviewed them, and she ended up capturing all of this in a 45-chapter book, one day for each chapter of them working with Tito's partisans and escaping. So he just wanted to share that story with all of you, and I wish he could have been here. He would have really enjoyed chatting with all of you. So thanks for your time.
Thanks, Ray. That was great. Okay, our next question.
I was a B-24 pilot with 35 missions, but I wanted to ask you gentlemen whether you ever had any experience with the WASPs, the Women's Air Service pilots, because one of my assignments was flying a B-26 over anti-aircraft in El Paso and getting shot at, but my co-pilot was a WASP lady. And I grew to understand what wonderful women they were, like Jacqueline Cochran, who started the thing back before the war and set more records than almost any man. And the WASPs got the short end of the stick in so many ways, and I think they should be acknowledged because they flew just about every plane that we had. They did all kinds of work, and they were kicked out of the Air Force before the war ended. It took them many, many years to get acknowledged. They finally built a museum in Texas, and I've helped to support that because I think they should get recognition. They were wonderful people, the ladies.
I think we have time for a couple more questions, and then, yes, thank you.
All right, this isn't a question, but my husband and I were both widowed when we met, and it was as if he wanted to impress me with all that he had done, and everything he said added more brownie points. He made 67 bombing missions. He flew a 10-engine plane. He put the bomb through the eagle's nest, a 20-foot window, went back the next day and found Goring's diary, sent it home with a lot of other mementos, and it wasn't there. But he had 9 brothers, so we know it went probably to one of them. So anyway, we ended up being married, and we've been married 30 years.
Great. Any other questions? Maybe one more, and then you're going to have time to speak to everybody. There's 2 more, and I'll get you, sir. I'll get you, sir, next.
Yes. First, I would like to thank all of you for serving our country. Very brave. I appreciate all the sacrifices, and it'll never be forgotten. My specific question is for Mr. Charles. You said you were in Poland in 1938 preparing for an invasion. I was wondering exactly who were y'all preparing for? The Nazis or the Russians, or maybe both? And how did you exactly know the invasion was coming?
Yeah, there's a lot of your question I was not
Who did you think, in 1938, who did you think might be the invaders? Were the Russians or the Nazis?
Nazis, definitely.
Nazis.
Yes. One day it proved to me, because I was flying back from the target practice, and I had some ammunition in my training plane, and suddenly there was a lot of clouds. There were a lot of clouds, and suddenly a German plane pops out of the one cloud, and I couldn't reach for the fire, and when he disappeared in the other cloud. So it was obviously no question in our mind that the Germans would be the invaders, because that Hitler was definitely particularly mad with Poles, because for a few years before the war, he tried to talk Polish government and have them join him against Russia. And every time they got together, discussed everything, but at the end was question no. And he was mad every time. So when the chance came, he took it. And he's the one who started it all.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm sorry we're not going to have time for any more questions, but one of the things I wanted to say to these gentlemen was, what does having the B-17 in town this week mean to you? And I don't think I need to answer the question. I think we all know it now. And I invite you all, we've got some posters on the back on the refreshment table about the scheduling. If you can come out for a ride or a walk around or just a visit. Tomorrow would be a half a day in the afternoon, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, 9 to 5. And also on the back table, we have a clipboard. Two purposes. One is to gather your name and an email address if you would like to be informed of other events. Another thing is if you'd like to turn it over, and if we do this next year, would you like to do it next year? Would you like that? If we do this again and you were not seated on the panel, and you might be able to, if you would like to participate in a panel next year, if you'd please give us your name and contact information for next year, that would be great. Okay, we'll break now. We have to vacate this building by 9, but I hope that you'll have some refreshments and enjoy greeting these heroes personally. Thank you very much.